Those of you who are old enough to remember it, Paladin was one of the most symbolic and allegorical TV shows that ever played. The Paladin were noble knights in Charlemagne's court. They were actually real characters. And I've been asked so many times, why do we use a chess knight as our symbol? Why do we use a chess knight as our logo? And what happens is, you've heard us use the phrase, play chess, not checkers, but the essence of a chess knight actually operates at multiple levels. Part of it is that sense of thinking about the next move, and the move after that, and the move after that. So strategically that's important, but it's also in local government in particular, our challenge is to think about the next generation, and the generation after that, and the generation after that. Part of what happens with the chess piece, the knight as a chess piece, it is the most flexible, it is the piece that has the widest array of moves. It's the only piece that can jump over and around barriers of other pieces. And in local government, that sense of being able to take and figure out a way around the barriers is the routine. Many of you remember Ann Richards when she was governor of Texas and was asked about being a woman who had run for governor, brought back the image of Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire. And her comment was, Ginger Rogers did everything Fred did, but she did it going backwards and in high heels. See, what happens, I'm convinced that's a good allegory for local government managers as well. The reality is, one of the reasons it is very difficult for private sector folks to succeed in the public sector is because it is so complex and complicated to lead in the local government environment. So part of what we've got to do is learn how to act tactically but think strategically. And what I also love about the sense of the Paladin is that if you go back and study real history, what you find is that the legend of the Knights of the Round Table actually grew out of this real group of 12 knights of Charlemagne. And they were called the 12 Noble Knights. They felt a sense of making a difference and being willing to sacrifice for the greater good. And that really is the essence of servant leadership, and it's the essence of public service. And then my favorite line out of that particular song, and it's one of the reasons I wanted you to hear the song, is a knight without armor in a savage land. If that phrase doesn't describe city managers and public administrators in today's world, no phrase does. I love that phrase as an allegory for what it's like to be a public administrator today. And then ultimately the other thing that drew me to the chess knight as a representation for the logo and for the value system that we really try to instill is that for me personally, my son and I started every summer, we take a trip together. He's married and 22 now, and we started this when he was 5. And we started playing chess together. That became our thing. Today still is. When he comes into town, we'll go to dinner and we'll sit and play chess while we eat, and that is our thing as a father and a son. And see, the beauty of chess, part of the implication of that, just as with my son and I, is that the student becomes the master. See, when I started off playing with him, I beat him 100% of the time. And then gradually that moved downward to about 80% of the time. and then about 60% of the time, and then about 40% of the time. And now I beat him about 20% of the time. I exult in losing. See, there is, as a leader, our challenge, particularly within the context of a servant leadership value system, our role as leaders is to surround ourselves with people who are smarter and more capable than we are, and to invest in making them better than we are. When we begin thinking about servant leadership, what we've really got to do is start out by thinking about the context. We are in a very difficult world. The U.S. Army War College, which is the training ground for generals, coined the phrase volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity to describe the world we've got to operate in. And we get that when we look at it with international affairs. We get it when we look at war that's taking place. But it's what's happening in our communities as well. It's exactly what's happening in our communities. So when we start thinking about servant leadership and how do we create that culture, what we've really got to think about is the context that we're operating in. And how do we come up with a strategy to control our destiny in this VUCA world? Jack Welch said that culture trumps strategy every time. In other words, great culture can overcome bad strategy, but great strategy can never overcome lousy culture. And yet most of our organizations devote about 99% of our resources to strategy and about 1%, if that much, to culture. See, and the reality is what we've got it bottom side up, and we really don't get that we're putting our resources in the wrong spot to be able to control our future, to control our destiny. The real question is, how do you create, nurture, and protect the kind of culture you desire to create? And the answer is recruiting, assessing, and developing the right kind of leaders for the future. That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. Recruiting, assessing, and developing is what you do.